Richie, it's been a dramatic time in your homeland through the election period. The country is going through so much with riots, allegations of electoral fraud. There is one thing that stands out in our discussions: how beautiful Guyana is and how great Guyana can be. Do you think the current events put that potential for greatness at risk?
I definitely think the current events that are going on right now make us want to question whether the country could still be great. Right? We have riots on the ground. We have allegations of electoral fraud. These are not light things. These are serious things, right? Anytime you see riots and potential situations where elections are at risk, you could question the greatness about any country, not just Guyana. If you can remove bias and you could look at Guyana with a purely objective lens, it's undeniable that it still has greatness in its future. There are resources in the country that are unique and differentiating. There are resources in the people that are unique. For example, Guyana is on the Eastern time zone with New York City and the United States. That's pretty interesting because there are many countries that cannot really conduct commerce with the U.S. because they're in a different time zone. For example, call centers, right? When you call someone and they answer the phone, call centers are mostly in India or in other parts of Asia. They're on the reverse time zone of the U.S. or of New York. Guyana is actually on the Eastern time zone, which is a really, really good thing. It means that you're open for business the same time New York City is open for business. That's a natural resource of its own, right? Guyana is a 5-hour flight away from New York City. That in itself means that commerce should be happening there. Most of commerce happens in Asia today. You know, in my business life, when I have to travel to India or to Asia, that's an 18, 20-something hour flight. Guyana is just 5 hours away. And more importantly, Guyana has fantastic weather. It's summer all year round, right? Wow. Just those things alone should set up a geographic region for greatness. Right. The added on top of that is the people resources. So there are some unique things in Guyana that sets it up for potential greatness. For example, diversity. You know, Guyana is the land of 6 people. So we have Amerindians, we have Chinese, we have Portuguese, we have Africans, we have Indians. There are many races in Guyana. Guyana is one of those really, really unique places where you would see, in one village, you would see a Hindu temple, an Islamic mosque, and a Christian church a couple of 100 yards away from each other in the same village. And on a Sunday morning, everyone's walking to their own place of worship together. Oh. Right? That type of diversity is fascinating. Diversity is something of strength, and we know that today. From a people resources standpoint, the people are English speaking. Mm-hmm. You know, we do so much commerce with other countries that speak different languages. Guyana is English speaking as the native language because it's an ex-British colony. And I think last, but certainly not least, it's a highly educated community. So for all intents and purposes, Guyana is a very small country. There's 750,000 people, which is relatively small. Usually small countries like that don't have a high percentage of educated individuals, right? The literacy rate is relatively low. Highly educated population of individuals. So you got a country that's in the right time zone, within the right proximity, has great weather, has massive diversity, speaks English, and highly educated. Just that alone sets it up for greatness. Now, of course, it is not necessarily the greatest country in the world. The world is seeing that today because of all the international attention, because of the elections, and because of the major discovery of oil that occurred in the country, which is a positive. But at the crux of the problem, which is why is it that this is not one of the greater countries in the world, is that there is a fundamental premise of racial tensions within the country, right? And that's mostly racial tensions that have been built up for decades between Afro-Guyanese and between Indo-Guyanese. So those from India and those from Africa. And that racial tension is sort of the bedrock that holds the country back. It's as you and I have talked about many times, right? racial tension, racism, it cuts deep.
Yes.
It cuts extremely deep. It hurts really bad. And it takes a really, really long time to get over. Yes. Right? So I believe that the country can still be great. But I think that it has to figure out a way to get rid of the history of racism in the country. And that's not easy to do, right? We have such a difficult time here in the US with it. We see it being difficult all across the world. The good news is Guyana is a really nice small melting pot. And the people, for the most part, you know, there are things that connect them together, like the food and the music and stuff, and we'll talk about that in a second. But what I think is needed at this moment is forgiveness. It's really hard to get over things that cut deep. It's really hard to get over things that hurt really bad or that stick in your memory for decades. You have to forget. You have to forgive. That's the only way we can move forward. You can't wait for that point where, you know, and the argument is always, oh, that side did bad, so we have to do bad as well, right? Or look at what they did to us, so we have to do the same thing for them. You can't wait for a time when it's like equal and like, okay, we'll stop today. That's not going to happen. There needs to be forgiveness. And forgiveness starts first with recognition of what's good and what's bad, and then a reconciliation of how we move forward, and then to rebuild from there. So I don't think that the greatness or the potential for greatness is gone. I do think that it's the time to start to figure out what's holding us back, what's at the core of holding us back, and I think that's racial tension.
If the first step is recognition, what do you think the Guyanese people need to do to move forward?
I think the first thing is we have to see what has already been done and then see what's left to do. Recognition requires that you are true in what is happening and you're factual. There's a lot of good things that's already been done that are just not recognized. You know, infrastructure, right? When I grew up in Guyana, my entire village had, you know, barely any piece of brick road. It was mostly dirt. Now there's brick roads in a majority of the cities in the country. That's recognition of we've made some progress. Rule of law. You know, yes, there's still crime, yes, there's still corruption, but it's way better. The police force is a little bit more accountable. The legalities are a little bit more clear. People are being prosecuted a little bit more. So there's been developments there. Just general cooperation. You know, I think the different races are starting to cooperate more. I think 1 in 5 Guyanese now has been involved in some interracial relationship or interracial marriage. That's fantastic, right? Because we're desensitizing the differences. So there's a lot that's already been done. I think what's left to do, though, is very important, right? What's left to do is to really start to think about the politics in the country. Ghana has a very, very unique type of politics. While in the beginning, there were very, very good and brilliant ideologies about how the country would move forward from colonialism. However, over the years, the party lines are no longer defined by ideology. And by ideology, I mean there's no longer a liberal party or a conservative party. Yes, it's still in the names, right? There's the Progressive Party and the National Congress. But most of it is divided by ethnic lines. If you're a youth in Guyana, just to bring this to life for you, if you're a youth in Guyana and you're trying to decide what party you want to vote for, because it's the first time you needed to vote, you know, the first selector that will be triggered in your mind, the first thing inherently in your mind that you will think about is what's the racial affiliation? You know, what party represents my race? And while that happens in many other countries, it's not the first thing that you think about, right? The first thing that you think about in other countries is, do I align with their ideology? Do I want to support a liberal party? Do I want to support, you know, a conservative party? But in Guyana, race is the number one differentiator when you think about which party do you go with. And that creates some very, very dangerous things. There's work to do there. Because when an election is won or when an election is lost, when it's ideology based, right, where, oh, my party lost and so their beliefs are going to carry forward, or my party won so my beliefs are going to carry forward, the other side could heal. right? You can heal from it. It happens in the US, it happens in Canada, it happens in the UK, it happens in the Caribbean. When two parties that have differences in ideology, one loses, the other side usually heals. But when you layer that on top of racism, it's really hard to heal, because it's no longer that, oh, an ideology lost. It's, oh, we lost to the Indo-Guyanese, or, oh, we lost to the Afro-Guyanese. So all of that intergenerational baggage of racism comes with the electoral loss. It's almost like every 5 years when an election happens, we open up Pandora's box and pull out all the painful stuff and bring it back out so we can all remember it and suffer the pain again. I look at it and I say, you know, every 5 years when the political parties have an elections where one could win and one could lose, no matter who wins, Guyana loses. Because the pain is so harsh. And I think this is the work that's left to be done. We have to realize that in order for us to thrive, in order for us to be great and leverage those natural resources and those natural gifts that we have, time zone, weather, education, diversity, all that type of stuff, and take advantage of the work that's done already with the infrastructure, right? We got to do the work that needs to be done, and that is to really move the political system to ideologies not based on race. And there's a lot of accountability here, right? There's accountability in the politicians. There's accountability in the key opinion leaders. There's accountability in the people. Yes. There's also accountability in the journalism. You know, absolutely. Journalism is under attack across the entire world. Biases are higher in journalistic content than it's the highest that they've ever been. Guyana has the same problem, right? The propaganda and the journalism are highly divided. Again, not around ideology, but around race. So I think we have to recognize where we are. We really have to come to terms with the fact that we're on a journey. And what we're trying to do is we're trying to be a country that's on the international stage, that's open for business. And there are customers coming, because Guyana is now a petro state. Guyana is one of the very few countries in the world now that has ever manufactured more than 1 million barrels of oil. It's on target to manufacture hundreds of millions of barrels of oil, right? So we need to get past this stuff, and we don't have 3 to 4 generations to wait to get rid of this pain or to get rid of this memory. The baggage, we have to put it down. And when the only way to put down baggage, or at least one of the best ways I know to put down baggage, is to put it down with forgiveness. And forgiveness starts with a recognition of where we are. Once we can recognize where we are, then we can start to reconcile.
You mentioned the second step is reconciling without blame or scorekeeping. How do we do that?
Just like recognition, it's a little bit difficult. But if it's in your mind, and it's in enough people's mind, we can get it done. Okay. Reconciliation is about truth. It's about understanding why something happened. What was the motivation behind it? Was it intentional or not? Mm-hmm. And does that person need to be held accountable forever? Right. So I've had both the pleasure and the privilege of experiencing racial tensions in Guyana in high definition. Okay. I lived, and Guyana is at least at one point in time, now things are blending a little bit more. At one point in time, there was a very clean line between here is the Indo-Guyanese village, and then here is the Afro-Guyanese village. Right, mm-hmm. and they were territorial, like not to lurk in the other village where you don't belong, right? Okay. I was raised in the last house in an Indo-Guyanese village, so my next door neighbor was an Afro-Guyanese. They were in the first house of the Afro-Guyanese village, and then for a mile and a half it was only Afro-Guyanese in that direction, and for a mile and a half in this direction it was only Indo-Guyanese. So you're like, and so right, so I got this upfront experience of racism, where I was friends with my neighbor. I was absolute friends with my neighbor. We played, we made kites and flew them together. We made toys, we played in each other's yard. We were awesome friends. Race didn't matter. Right. And as a child, it was sort of strange to me that when there was a bit of a quarrel, as we would call it in Guyana, or a bit of a tension between the two villages, I would have to go off to my side, and he would have to go off to his side,
wow.
because we have to belong to our tribe, right? Friendship doesn't step over that, and you have to come to terms with the truth, right? It's not that anyone is racist. It's not that Indo-Guyanese are racist or Afro-Guyanese are racist. That's not what's going on. It's racism is just a part of the fabric. It's just something you do. It's innate in you, right? No Afro-Guyanese parents tells their kids to hate Indo-Guyanese. No Indo-Guyanese parents tell their kids to hate Afro-Guyanese. It's just the environment around that's creating this behavior. And the minute you start to reconcile that it's not deliberate, you can actually start to get past it. That's the first step. You have to reconcile with the truth, which is that it was not deliberate. Now, I'm not saying that there weren't deliberate acts, right? If there was enough antagonizing that happened, of course there were deliberate acts, right? If there was enough provoking that happened, of course there were deliberate acts. But those acts happened when things boiled over.
Right.
But most of what led there was not deliberate. And I think when we start to reconcile the truth that it was not deliberate, it's easier to forgive. And we have to forgive. You can't get over racism with fighting. You can't get over racism with trying to educate people that diversity is good. You have to forgive the past because it cuts deep. It hurts really bad, and it sticks in your memory for decades. So I think as a first step of reconciliation is to come to terms with the intentionality of the acts. I would say 80%, I would say for any Guyanese, 80% of what they felt as racism was completely unintentional. Completely unintentional. And I think that's where we start.
That's very powerful.
People will ask, why now? Like, why is it important now? It's important now because there is something to lose. There's a shared opportunity in front of us for prosperity, right? All those things that we have as natural resources and all those things in our culture that are powerful, they're about to go on steroids because of our oil discovery, okay? And so there's a shared promise ahead. And I'm sure there are other ways to do it, and I think anyone who has other ways should suggest how we get over the racial tensions of the country. But my sense is that coming to terms with the truth, which is that most of it is not intentional, it's circumstantial, and recognizing that in the absence of forgiveness, there are very few ways that we can go forward, and we don't have generations to wait, I think that's where it lands.
What is that shared promise and opportunity?
Well, the shared promise and opportunity is Guyana now has the right to be open for business to the entire world. Okay. Guyanese are inherently industrious people. We don't know how to sit still. We're toilers. Okay. A Guyanese could take a coconut shell and make the most beautiful piece of art that you've ever seen, and they'll sell it to you as something that you put in your house as an ornament. Yeah, we're fishermen and fisherwomen, right? Everybody's got a small shop in their house. Someone who's lucky enough to have a refrigerator, they sell ice, right? Like we're very, very industrious people. And so we understand what it means to be open for business. As an individual, as a family, to sell within your village or within your community or your region. What we need to understand is that as a country, we can now be open for business for international trade. Okay? That's really the point that we need to come to terms with. That's what's in front of us. And in Ghana, there's a saying, you know, man, just give me a chance. Give me an opportunity to do something, right? If you are talking to teenagers, you know, teenagers maybe not 14, but maybe 18, 19, 20 in Guyana, right? What they want is they want a chance. Yes. They want a chance to have prosperity, okay? One of my And I have this view in my head right now of like walking up to a bunch of kids and asking them what they want. One of my favorite villages in Guyana is a village named Rosignol. I grew up next to a village named Rosignol. Okay. And Rosignol is fascinating because both Indo-Guyanese and Afro-Guyanese live in Rosignol. And it only has a main road. Most of the other roads, cars don't go through. And so kids are always playing in those roads, right? Whether it's cricket or soccer, okay. Right? Not football, but soccer. They're always playing there. If you walked up to a bunch of kids right now playing cricket or soccer in Rosignol and you ask them what they want, they're looking for a chance. That's what they're looking for. Mm-hmm. And what I am saying is that Guyana has been asking for a chance, and now it's here. And what they have is a choice as to whether we take it or not. Right? We've been asking for a chance for a very long time, and now we got one, and we have to make a choice about how we go get it. For example, with oil and with prosperity, with the resources that we have, there's going to be economic activity in the country. More people will travel to Guyana. Yes. Right? Airlines will have to fly there more. Hotels will have to be built. Restaurants will have to be built. Transportation will have to be there. Guyana has some of the most beautiful rainforests in the entire world. There are more species of undiscovered birds and fishes in Guyana than the entire South America. That tourism is about to go on overdrive because of the international attention that will come from the oil and the prosperity. Mm-hmm. We've been asking for a chance. We got it. Now we have a choice to decide how we act there. So if you are thinking about the promise and the shared opportunity that's in front of you and what you're looking for, it's not just to be open for business in your village. Mm-hmm. It's how do you partake in the country being open for business for international trade. For example, if you own a nice home in Kitty is a part of Georgetown, which is the capital of the country. If you own a nice home in Kitty, there's a lot of people that will be flying into the country, a lot of people that will need hotels to stay, right? Are you going to rent your house out on Airbnb, which is being open for business, mm-hmm. right? Or are you going to be an investor in the hotel that's built in the country, mm-hmm. right? That's what's at stake. There are customers coming, and this country is about to be open for international business. And what cannot stand in the way is the intergenerational legacy of racism. Right? What we need is intergenerational choice and opportunity that we give to the kids. Right? I'm a parent. When you tuck your kids in at night, what do you want? A better world for them.
Absolutely.
Well, there's a better world right in front of Guyana right now, and there's a choice that has to be made. That choice is, are we going to do it as a racially divided nation where our politics are aligned around ethnic lines, or are we going to do it as a nation that's unified where our politics are a difference in ideology? After all, the founders of Guyana named it the Cooperative Republic of Guyana. Where's the cooperation? The motto of Guyana is one people, one nation, one destiny. That's the motto of Guyana. It's been written 50-something years ago. It was written down. We're just now following the tea leaves. That's where I think we are.
That sounds beautiful, but how? If I am a member of the press, the clergy, or if I'm a youth, how can I personally take action?
The moment is now for sure. And I think a lot of it has to do with thinking about time. We have to break up what's in our mind about Guyana into three parts. Okay. We have to break it up into the past, the present, and the future. The issue right now is we're in the present fighting for the future, but the past is holding us back. That's where it's at right now. I think the first step that we need to take is we need to start looking at time. We need to break down everything that we have in our head as Guyanese citizens into time. We need to separate the past from the present and separate the present from the future, right? Okay. We're fighting for the future in the present, but the past is holding us back. And the past has to be forgiven, right? Yes. We talked about this, right? I believe most of the racial tension is unintentional, is circumstantial, right? And I don't know many good ways to get over racism other than waiting for generations and generations of things to happen,
Right.
other than forgiveness. We have to look at the past and forgive it. It's our only way, I believe. If there are other ways to do this, people should come up with the ideas. We will all take them. I believe forgiveness is extremely powerful.
Absolutely.
We have to forgive what happened in the past, or the racism will continue to follow us. And so, you know, don't ask for forgiveness, just give it. If you're an Indo-Guyanese right now and you have an Afro-Guyanese friend,
Okay.
call them tonight. Call them tonight and say, hey man, can you forgive me? And I guarantee you they're going to say, forgive you for what, bro?
Right.
And you're going to say, you know, our races, we've had a terrible past in this country. There's things that's been done on both sides. Can you forgive me? Think about how powerful that is. Think about what that says. One at a time. There's only 750,000 people in the country. It's possible for more than half of the country to forgive each other. If you're an Afro-Guyanese right now and you got an Indo-Guyanese friend or a neighbor or a cousin or some in-law because there was some marriage or something like that, call them up and say, hey man, any chance you could forgive me? They said, forgive me for what? You know, we've had some bad history in this country between the races. I'm asking you to forgive me just in case I've ever done anything unintentional.
Wow.
That's so powerful.
Yeah.
Everybody's got phones. We know everybody's numbers. And I think that's how we take the power back from politicians using our differences to peddle weak politics. That's how we hold them accountable. To say, hey man, you better come up with an ideology. Because I'm no longer voting across the race lines.
Right.
That's how we take it back.
That's the answer.
I felt it as well. My voice was crackling a little bit on that one. Because if we don't, it's going to affect us. When we think about the present, we have to recognize that we don't have 2 to 3 generations to figure this out. We've probably got 3 to 5 years at best before the jury is out on whether Guyana actually benefits from its wealth and its natural resources or the external parties benefit from it. We don't have that much time. We have to recognize that the present moment is extremely crucial. Yes. And I got to be honest with you, while I am saddened by the riots that are going on in the country, while I am saddened by the allegations of electoral fraud, yes, I am somewhat satisfied that at least now the international community and the entire world is actually paying attention and looking at the country. Because what that does for us is if we didn't think now was important, now you know it's important for sure when everybody's paying attention. Now, of course, yes, many of those people are paying attention because of the wealth and the oil, but yes, exactly. That's why we should pay attention too. Yes. So the present is extremely important. And then we have to look to the future, right? When you go through decades of having no opportunity, no prosperity, it's hard to sit down in a house that's barely holding together, eating food that you barely got, right? Wearing the same clothes that you've been wearing for 5 years, right? And washing it every night, hoping that it dries the same day. I lived that life. It's really hard to hear that there is a future that is for you. But I would say that if we have a chance at actually having a piece of that future that could come from the wealth of this country, we will not get it unless we forgive the past. Yeah. Racism and politics that are aligned along racism is exactly what the external forces want. so that they can divide and conquer. Unity is the weapon, not division. Unity is how we win. Inclusiveness is how we win, not division. So that's the cultural side.
Yeah.
And there's sequence here. You gotta get the cultural stuff first. On the political side, that's the next thing. Okay? Now, we're not going to go remove the two majority parties. That's not going to happen. They're highly ingrained, right? We're not going to go replace the political system. That's not going to happen. It's highly ingrained. But what we can do is we can actually be active in the political process by asking ourselves questions and asking other people's questions. If someone is approaching you to vote, okay, you should ask them, what is your political ideology? Are you progressive? Do you believe that the way we should operate as a country is that we should look to new and innovative ideas and take it in and don't be afraid of change and don't try to hold on to history and the status quo? Or are you conservative, which is we want to hold on to the status quo, we want to preserve what we know and not go too eagerly into the future? What's your political ideology? We have to ask that question. That question is not asked enough. Most people align themselves to a party based on race, and that is a recipe for failure. So ask the questions, ask the politicians, what is your political ideology? And if they can answer it, which I think would be fascinating, then ask them, how is that different from the political ideology of the party that you don't want me to vote for? Right? We got to get woke about politics in order to be able to get there. I think the second is we have to really ask questions about what is required to lead. We have to prosecute the talent, right? What's required to lead? Is it that you have experience in government before? Is it that you have military experience? Is it that you have financial experience? Is it that you're spiritual? Is it that you're charismatic? Over the history of the country, there's been many great leaders, but there's been pretty crappy leaders as well that didn't have the actual talent to lead. And guess what? The way they got there is because they followed the racial line, right? And then last, I think, is transparency. As we're seeing in the country today, transparency is under attack, right? And when transparency is under attack in the political process, democracy is under attack. Democracy is the operating system of freedom. Freedom is the raw material of prosperity. That's how we get there.
Wow, Richie, you have given us a lot to think about. And you and I have discussed in the past about how both of us are blessed to be able to rise above our circumstances and help other people. It seems like even though you left Guyana, it has never really left you. Is that true?
It's not just for me. I think it's broadly for all immigrants, and maybe a little bit more heightened just for Guyanese. If you drive around Little Guyana, which is a part of New York called Richmond Hill, there's a lot of Guyana flags hanging in people's cars. There's a lot of pride that comes with the country. There were large groups of people demonstrating in New York City and in Toronto just last week in defense of democracy. Right? These are folks who took days off from work to demonstrate for democracy in a country that they came from. So the country really never leaves you. And I don't know why. It certainly has never left me. Maybe it's the music, maybe it's the food, maybe it's the colors. I can't tell you why that's the way it is, but it certainly never left me. What I think is important, though, is not whether you left Guyana or not. It's if you did leave Guyana, what are you bringing back? Right? And a lot of people who have left Guyana have the same sort of vantage point that I have, which is you now have the opportunity to look at it very objectively, right? Because you're not in the mix of it. There's no question in my mind that if I was actually still living in Blairmont and I was still doing what life would have given me to do, and I was listening to someone else who was not living in Guyana give me this advice, it wouldn't hit me as hard, right? But at the same time, I would ask you to give me the permission to share, because it's the objectivity that I can see from the outside and others can see from the outside, and it could help us bring things back, right? Just a point of view on racism, right? When you see racism in the US versus racism in Guyana, it teaches you how different racism could be. In Guyana, the oppressors are not there. They've left. It's the oppressed that are there that are still fighting. In the US, the oppressors and the oppressed are living together. It's different. So it's in that vantage point that we have to bring back economics. The US is not about just GDP within the country. It's about GDP with international trading partners. That's how you thrive, right? You look at politics and you realize politics is not about race and hate, but it's about love and unity, right? Mm-hmm. So even though people have left the country, it never really leaves them. But I think that doesn't need to be accounted for. I think the only thing that needs to be accounted for is, what do you bring back? Yes. Are you bringing back learnings? Are you bringing back insights? Are you bringing back some chocolates and some gifts as well, right? When you go back to Guyana as a foreigner, chocolates are very important to bring back to the country, right? It's like you're coming back from Switzerland, right? So I think we the international community of Guyanese who are sort of still here, that have never left the country spiritually but have only left physically, have lots to bring back, and I hope that I would be granted the permission to share what I think could be brought back, which is we really need to recognize where we are in the journey, all right? We need to reconcile the past and the future and forgive anything from the past. And then we really need to come together and start to rewrite this narrative about what Guyana could be and not worry about what Guyana was. You know, I would say that there should not be another election in the country that wakes up the racial wounds. I think one more will be one too much.